Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about the quilt pattern, Trip Around the World, but sometimes it's often called Around the World, which is what we call it. And so this pattern is what we chose when we were making my son's quilt. And I say we because my son was very involved. He ended up picking all the fabric. I let him go and pick whatever he wanted. And of course, he chose all the animals that I had in my stash. So this pile of fabric that I ended up with when he started out this process did not go together. I remember looking at it thinking, how in the world am I going to put this in a quilt? It's just going to look crazy. There was just colors from all over the rainbow and nothing really had right tones. None of the motifs really worked together. The whole thing just was crazy. It looked crazy. And so I ended up fiddling with a few patterns and landed on Around the World, which his quilt is now called Animals Around the World, as you can guess, because of the animals. And so what I really loved about this pattern is that it's so forgiving. He had so many crazy colors and it didn't matter. When we put it together, it had such a stunning effect. And so there's two ways that you can go about putting together this quilt. Today, I am going to show you how we did it, which is kind of the fussy way of putting together the quilt. And this pattern specifically, we ended up taking all of the squares and we laid them out square by square on top of his bed. And we wanted to see and play around with the color values and the contrasting colors and the harmonious colors, everything that kind of worked together and things that didn't work together, we could kind of fiddle with on this pattern. And so it's definitely not the quick way. The quick way I will show you in another video in this series that I'm going to make. But for today, I am going to show you how we put together our Animals Around the World. So let's get started.
So to begin with, find a fabric that you really like to go right in the center, something that you could showcase. This one here, I really like the flowers in it. On my son's, I use these crazy animals with sunglasses. Next to it, I put the white because the value of the dark center and the light around it really contrasts well and just centers that quilt so nicely. Next, I went with a hot red because it has a little fleck of white polka dot in it, and so the white and the red really work together. Next, I tried a really electric blue, and I thought this Baltic blue would really look nice around it because it's kind of a crazy contrast to the red, but I found that the cool and the red was maybe just a bit too much, and it was too much plain. If you notice, we have the white, the red, and the blue, and there's just too much. So I'm looking for a bolder motif, and this one has a really strong butterfly motif to it. Not huge, but kind of a medium motif, whereas the middle piece and the red have very small motifs on them. Whereas these motifs, the butterflies just worked well. Plus, that butterfly has a ring of red around it, so it matched with the piece right beside it, the red polka dot. Next, I'm trying different fabrics to see where I wanted to go next. I thought maybe a contrasting fabric, but I found that the motif was too big and it kind of fought with the butterfly. So I'm trying peach, that doesn't work. The dark, maybe the light. Once I started putting these out, I realized, nope, I'm going to run out of squares here. I don't have enough in this. These are all just random squares that I have in my stash. Now this one, I had a lot of squares, and I really like this flower. There's a lot of space around the flowers, and I'm going through picking out the flowers specifically because the center of the flower actually matches the background of the butterfly. So it worked. Notice I'm not trying to match to the center. I'm only matching what's beside my fabric. So next I'm looking for something else. I thought, oh, maybe I could try that peach again, because the peach has a red flake in it, and I thought maybe it would work, but the peach was just fighting with everything. This one has red and white, but I realized the value of that is too close. Again, trying with the yellow because of the red, but it's just fighting too much. I think too much peach in it, and it's just too wild. So I tried with this white fabric. Again, the values are too similar that it just washes out. When you're standing back, you won't actually see it. So I ended up going with a nice bold, dark value. And it also has the polka dot, so it kind of matched that red. It doesn't really match the fabric beside, but I know that it's going to frame it well. So then I went with that white check with the little hearts, and the hearts actually have all the colors of the whole entire square throughout it. There are two ways to collect your fabric when preparing for sewing. This way, I am stacking my fabric from the top to the bottom in proper order. Each pile will be pinned and labeled with masking tape, row 1, row 2, row 3, etc. If you're new to sewing or you don't want to make a mistake with this pattern, this form of collecting and sewing is not quick. It's more dependable. It's definitely a way to guarantee that your pattern turns out the way you want it. The second way that you go about collecting your fabric is you place row 1 right sides together onto row 2, and then you chain stitch down the side. Row 3 goes onto row 4, and row 5 goes on to 6, and again you chain piece down the side. Once you have these all collected, you pile them up into piles, and you'll see this is a faster way of doing it. So here are my piles. I chose the second way, which is the chain stitching, and you can see that this pattern comes together really quickly. I had an odd number of rows, so I sewed my last strip in a row. And here's our piece completed. Doesn't it look fantastic? So I hope you enjoyed all the tips and tricks given in this first tutorial of the pattern around the world.